in this session, we're gonna talk about some integration that we have done with a build environment, Azure, and SystemWeaver requirements, and some test cases that we are running. They're written in Python and they're checked into a Git repository. And the process looks like what you see in the picture. My colleague Torsten will show you how you can create traceable. First of all, the requirement set in SystemWeaver he will show you. Then he will show you some Python code that he has made to realize this simple mathematical operations component that we have built, and also the test cases related to that. That he has also done in Python, and from the test cases he refers to requirements in SystemWeaver, and then he checks in the code, and then he has some scripts that will be executed, the test scripts in the build environment. A JSON file, a formatted JSON file will be produced, and based on this JSON file and the data in SystemWeaver, we will also create a PDF report, which will represent the test report for this component. And all of these artifacts will be checked into Git. So they're stored alongside with the code for future use and delivery. So Torsten, you're welcome to take over.
Okay, so then I move over to SystemWeaver, and we have a structure with some requirements for simple mathematical operations. We have addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and exponentiation. And we had a previous version for this. So we are in version 2, and we have made some changes. So I think we will be able to see the changes when we run our tests, and we will see that we haven't covered all the requirements since we have new versions and we have added things. So we have those here. They have different IDs, and I think I'm going to move over to the Python code here. So this is a very simple Python code to test these things. So we have a simple test for subtraction, for example, and to test it, it's a very simple example. So it's 5 minus 2 equals 3. So this is not to do an actual testing, it's just for an example. But in the function we're testing, we have added the SystemWeaver ID, so we can trace it backwards later on and see if we have made a test for this requirement or not. So here we have all our tests, and we have, for example, not a test for exponentiation, since we did this originally for the first version. So, and what will happen is that in the build environment, we use the Microsoft Azure pipelines. So in the pipeline, we will run this test. We will produce a JSON file with a test. Then we will run another Python program that converts the JSON file to standard format we use in SystemWeaver for test results. And finally, we run a Python program that converts the test results into a PDF file. I think I move over to the build environment where we use the Azure pipelines. Let's see if I have the... Yeah, here we can see this is a typical Azure pipeline. I have commented out masters we're going to trigger on all branches. And we decided that we're going to test our code in two versions of Python, Python 3.6 and Python 3.7. I have commented out Python 3.5 so we can run it a little bit faster. The build environment that we're going to use for this is a virtual machine with Ubuntu. So everything will be built on the Ubuntu virtual machine and run all the tests. And finally, when we create the report, we need to sync this with SystemWeaver. So we are, I think I run down here. Here is the final code that create the PDF file, and here's the Python code that creates a PDF file, and right before that we are running code to trying to find it here. Maybe that was early on. We ran, yeah, here we do. We have a Python code here that can read the requirements from SystemWeaver, and we do that by using our SystemWeaver REST API. So this Python code will check the config file, find all the requirements, and put them into a JSON file. So I think at this point we can make a small change in our code. I'm just going to add a few characters, and I'm going over, make sure I have the latest version, so I do a git pull. And now I can check in my code that we want to test. I have to write a comment. So I commit, and now I push to the repository. And when I push, this will automatically start this Azure pipeline. So I'm going to look at my pipelines, and we see that it is running here. There's a couple of things we have done now. Let's see, I move back here. There are different ways to display the results. One is to publish artifacts. So what we did was that we published a JSON file for each run.
Maybe we can have a look at this, because
yeah,
this test result is oriented based on the test cases that were run, but the PDF is oriented on the requirements. So here you will see all the tests that have been run and their result and the execution. I don't know, did we get the execution time here as well?
Now it's converted? An unformatted JSON file, so it's well, it seems that it's a little bit complicated. My Visual Studio think it's a read-only file, so I can't.
Yeah, I see.
It's all in one line, so it's a little bit.
Yeah, but here we see two requirements, right?
We have the test case name.
Yeah.
We have the test result if it passed or failed, and we have the how long time it took to run the test.
Yeah. So this would be a format that actually anyone can write to this format, and then you also executed another script to generate a PDF from this format then.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's correct. And based on actually, maybe it's good to show the config file as well, config.json. We can put this the format alongside with the video. In the description. And so what we're pointing to here, if you can jump back to SystemWeaver for a second, that we point to the ID of the component for which we want to show the test results to generate the test coverage report. If you click on that math operator.
Yeah, we have the top item is in the config file.
So it is the item handle that you see a little bit to the right. This one we're putting in the config file together with the username, password, and server address. So if we now go back to the Azure environment, here you have requirements as well, but then the converted unit test.json, this one you showed already. We can put the format of this as well up alongside the video. And then if you can show the PDF as well, that will maybe clarify something. These are the requirements ID in SystemWeaver. We started, as I mentioned, from the requirements ID in SystemWeaver. And then in the case where it's yellow, it means that you are actually testing something, but another version of that requirement. That's why it's yellow. Maybe it would be good actually to put in the requirement ID, because the requirement ID is stable over time, but then the SystemWeaver ID will change from version to version. So this is it is that requirement. Which method was it? Addition, that we had a new version on. And then we have two requirements on division and multiplication that haven't changed on version 2 of the component. So those are green. And then we actually deleted the original subtraction requirement. So that's why you see that there has been a test that points to a SystemWeaver requirement that is not in your scope. That's why
it's missing.
Yeah. And then we have two requirements that don't have any test methods connected to them. One of them is subtraction 2, so the new version of subtraction. Sorry, it's not a new version. Actually, it's a new requirement that is called subtraction 2, and exponentiation also. We don't have a test connected to it.
Yeah.
And this is quite scalable, so you can have this with as many requirements as you want. This method, and this other script to convert the JSON format to a PDF report is also quite generic. So if a user wants to can generate something, that JSON file, they can put in already this script in their build environment, and they will get the PDF.
Yeah, that should be possible.
So if you jump back for a second to SystemWeaver, maybe is it possible to kind of open it alongside with the report, like half the screen? There we go. So as you see, these are the same IDs in some cases. In the case where it's red, that ID doesn't exist in our context anymore. But if we look at version 1, then it would exist there. And there are two requirements there. The one ending with FDD and FE4, they don't have any test cases connected to them. So this is kind of a demonstration of how you can, in a simple way, integrate your or actually establish traceability and generate traceability reports from implementation to SystemWeaver. We have shown here only for test cases, but a very similar pattern could be applied also when you want to trace code to requirements, which is mostly on high ASIL levels. That is a requirement, but on a lower ASIL, it would be enough with this usually. Of course, if you don't have a different company policy.